Welcome to Zero's Game Room, where all things gaming takes place, interviews, discussions, and the latest gaming news. So take a seat, get comfortable, adjust your headset, because it's game time. Here's your host, Zero.
Welcome to Zero's Game Room, the podcast where we talk about all things gaming. Today we ask a very important question, a modern question for once. In the age where everything is digital, music, movies, even video games, and yeah, you can buy full video games virtually now, but is it possible that there's still a market for not only retro video games, but physical copies of retro video games, modern video games, and even more? So is there really a market for even arcade games, like arcade cabinets? With me today, I have Joey, who is the owner/founder of One Up Video Games in downtown Covina in Southern California. Welcome to the show, Joey.
Hey, thanks a lot. It's good to be here.
So the big question we should start off with, is there still a market for retro video games? You own a retro video game store, so what's your opinion on retro video games? Is there still a market for people who want to own physical copies?
I think there's a huge market for retro video games. I mean, the demand exceeds the supply, and every game sold usually does not go back into circulation. So if someone buys a Mario Kart, it becomes part of their collection, and it really doesn't go back on the market. So as time goes by, there's less and less games out there. Demand is still increasing as more people get involved in it, more people discover it. So yeah, I think there's a huge market still for retro video games. It's just hard finding the games now. Selling them is easy. It's finding the games.
So typically, tell the people, what type of games do you have? From what age to what? What do you have at your store that you still see people buy?
I mean, the most popular is Nintendo stuff, obviously. We carry, all the way back to the Magnavox Odyssey, all the way to...
Oh, wow. All the way back to the Magnavox Odyssey? Are you serious?
Yeah, which is 70s, I think. So the market for...
That's where you had the original Pong and whatnot.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the eras, all the way from 70s to, 2017.
And so when people come in, like you said, most of the stuff that is popular is Nintendo. Is there any specific console that people purchase more than others?
I mean, it kind of goes in waves. Some days people want nothing but N64. Other days we sell a lot of Super Nintendo. So it really just varies. I would say the two most popular systems right now, probably N64 and GameCube.
Especially because the GameCube didn't do necessarily so well. So a lot of the games are really rare, right?
They're just hard to get. I mean, the big issue with GameCube is there's a lot of broken GameCube discs. They're very difficult to repair. A lot of kids, played with GameCube, so condition, is a big factor. A lot of games come in pretty beat up. And of course, like you said, it wasn't very popular during its era, so there's less GameCube games out there. So
what is your opinion on things like nowadays you can buy games virtually, like Xbox has been doing it for a while where you can have things there. PSN has been doing it. And even now, I think Nintendo is going to be doing something with the Switch. They're going to have their own you pay to play online and stuff, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what's your opinion on that type of thing as opposed to because back in the day, you collected the boxes and whatnot. So what's your opinion from back then to now?
My opinion on what, on the games or
kind of that feeling of collecting, how back in the day you had the manual and you had all that and the box art, as opposed to now today, I feel like there's a lot less, right?
I mean, there's a lot less stuff. I think less attention is paid to the packaging, to the presentation. A lot of that has to do with of course, the internet, because reviews come out and there's a lot of promotion and a lot of videos and stuff like that. I think they focus on digital promotion and not so much the actual presentation of the physical copy. I think the Switch games are a perfect example. They come with nothing inside. So no manual, no paperwork, no pamphlet. It's literally just the game in a plastic box.
As opposed to like a Super Nintendo, like what would you get in a Super Nintendo? Like if you went out, bought Mega Man X fully back in the day, what would come with it?
I mean, Super Nintendo games, especially the old games like NES, Super Nintendo, to me, they're works of art. So, there was a lot of attention paid to the box, what it looked like, because for a lot of kids, especially kids in the 80s and 90s, you'd go to the store, you would see the box, and the box would really catch your attention. The packaging would really catch your attention. So I think it was really important for them to make a nice box. And then, of course, when you opened it, as a kid, you wanted to see the manual. The manual had
it was like opening on Christmas Day, you're opening a present.
Of course, and the manual was like really, really important. I remember going on road trips. You couldn't play video games on road trips, obviously. So the manual was something that we looked at, we read. It had original art inside. Of course, it told you how to play the game. It was just like a cool companion piece to the actual game, so.
Yeah, like it had more of a value. They put more, like you said, it was a work of art. They put more of their heart in what they wanted this piece to be, as opposed to nowadays. I think you said, like, literally nothing comes in. It's just the disc for the Switch?
Just the cartridge. Yeah, just the cartridge. And that's it.
That's crazy to think that that's all it comes with. Because I remember one of the games that I remember fondly, because for me, the Super Nintendo was what I grew up with. One of the games was Goof Troop. And I used to love reading the little booklet. And, like, they had, like, color sometimes. And, like, there was full artwork and just... There was so much attention to detail, I feel, back in the day. And like you said, it was the box art that caught your attention. That's not to say that games today don't have good box art or anything, but it's not what it used to be, right?
No, I mean, I think the box art is still pretty good. It's mostly the internals that have changed, like the content that you get inside the box. That's, it's gone to the point where it just doesn't exist anymore. The Switch really... I think the Switch is probably the first console to ever not have manuals inside, which is kind of surprising when you think about the history of Nintendo and you think about a lot of their early, releases and how fat the manuals are, how thick they were. So yeah, I mean, some people like it, some people don't. I'm probably, on the side that doesn't like it. I prefer to have artwork inside. I want a nice manual, and I want something to read and look at and view and stuff. So
there's a lot of people who just say no, like physical copies are going to be obsolete someday. What do you say to those type of people who are like, yeah, no, retro video games and physical copies, they're going to go? Do you really think that? Or do you think there will always be people who want the physical copy or retro video games, physical copies?
I mean, I think as time goes on, there's going to be less people who are attached to physical items, especially young people. Like, my son is 7. He could really care less if there's a manual in the box. He doesn't even really care about having the physical item. I mean, if he could purchase it on his Wii U, his Switch, he would prefer that than actually having a physical copy, a cartridge. It's me who insists on getting him the physical copy. And I think a lot of young people really have no attachment to physical items. So I feel definitely store-bought physical games will die eventually. And I think we're starting to kind of see the beginnings of that.
Wow, yeah, that's kind of painful to hear, though, to think that there will be a moment, maybe it's not necessarily anytime soon, but with age, it might go. Hopefully there are people. I personally love still owning physical copies. I love, like, sometimes opening a PS2 game or anything like that. Some PS2 games still had some pretty thick, like, manuals and stuff.
Definitely.
And some of them still came with good content, and even some of them, like the more deluxe editions or the the super special editions, came with extra stuff like a CD, like the soundtrack. I think it was Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo had some sort of thing with that, didn't it?
Yeah, the Killer Cuts CD. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The soundtrack.
Yeah. So another lost art, which it really saddens me because I remember growing up going to arcades. Arcade games are things you don't really hear about people going to the arcade anymore. Sometimes even like look at Xbox Live. They have like the Xbox Live arcade games where they kind of port some of the games. What do you think about arcade games and arcade consoles?
I mean, I love arcades. I've always loved arcades. I used to be a big Street Fighter player in the 90s, so the arcade was really kind of like the epicenter for video games, at least for me, because there was no internet. So you would go to the arcade and you would see someone use a character in a way you've never seen before. And then you just kind of took, something he did and incorporated into your game. So it was like an exciting time because you really never knew what to expect with an arcade. And unfortunately, when home consoles became popular, when home consoles became more powerful, less and less people went to the arcade, and more companies focused, most of the development on home consoles because they just made more money. And arcades, they died because they just did not make the same amount of money they were making in the early days. So that's why we are trying to bring the arcade back, and we're trying to show people, hey, this is what it was like. This is what people used to play. Even my son, I tell him like, hey, this is really where it was when we were young. Like the arcade was a huge part of our lives. And so yeah, that's what we want to do, is kind of bring the arcade back. It's definitely not as popular as it was in the 80s and 90s. It probably will never be that popular. But so far, the response has been good. People seem to like it. A lot of people are surprised that we even have these machines, or that these machines even exist anymore.
Yeah, talk about that a little more. What's going on? Because I've walked into the store and I've seen what's going on. Let people know what's kind of been happening in your store, because I remember a couple months ago there was like some remodeling being done and a lot of people didn't know what was going on. And recently when I walked in, I saw a whole bunch of arcade cabinets. So talk about that, of what's happening at One Up Video Games.
Well, we had this idea. We were just kind of bouncing around ideas because, our store's pretty huge. It's about 3,000 square feet. So we have like a big area in the back. We were using it to store games, and we thought, well, what could we do with this area? We thought maybe doing a game center, but you're basically trying to give people what they already have at their house. And usually at their house, you're more comfortable. You got your big TV. So we kind of...
You got your couch, you got your snacks, exactly. You got everything you could possibly want at home.
Pretty much, So we were bouncing around ideas, and we kind of came up with the idea of the arcade. Some people thought it would work. People within the store thought it was a good idea. Then we just kind of started asking people like, hey, man, what do you think about an arcade? And so the response was pretty positive. So we thought, let's just go for it. And we just started buying up arcades. We had no idea what we were doing. Some of the early machines that I bought, I probably would not have purchased now, just because we're a little bit more experienced and stuff. And we bought a lot of them really fast. Like this whole thing started maybe like 3 months ago, I would say. And in the span of 3 months, we probably purchased about 40 machines.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of machines. And what are some of like the staple games that you think people are attracted to right now?
Well, of course, you got to have the Street Fighters.
Of course.
And then, you got to have some of the early 80s games like Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Donkey Kong, Mario Brothers. You need the 90s 4-player games like Simpsons, X-Men, Sunset Riders.
Oh, you guys have Sunset Riders? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we have Sunset Riders.
Oh my gosh, I love Sunset Riders. I still have the port of it for the Super Nintendo, but it was just not the same. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the ports are really good, but the fact that you guys have Sunset Riders, that should be a reason to go.
Definitely, So yeah, we just started mixing it up, doing 80s and 90s. Of course, we have Mortal Kombat. We have a couple Japanese games. a couple shooting games like Terminator, Area 51. So those are really like the ones you remember in the arcade. Those are really the ones we're going for right now, like the really popular ones. The ones that kind of give you that like nostalgic feeling, like, hey, like I remember that. I remember playing in Shakey's that game, or I remember going to the arcade and playing this game. So that's really what we're going for, is to try to get some really cool 80s, 90s machines. And so far the response has been pretty good. The hardest thing for us right now is just getting the machines repaired, figuring out how to get certain things working, trying to find parts for these old machines, because we're pretty new to this whole arcade thing. And like I said, so far it's been a pretty good response. Our goal right now, we have 40. Our goal is to have 100 by the end of the year. Obviously, we can't fit 100 inside the store, so we're just going to rotate them every month. Keep like 20 of the core machines in here, and then rotate the other 20. So that's our goal for this year, is to have at least 100 by the end of the year.
Wow, that's quite a goal. I mean, you guys have a ways to go, so I think you could do it. Do you plan on having like tournaments with these arcades, or are they just for people to come and play and enjoy?
Tournaments are, I think, really important, and we definitely want to do tournaments. But I think to make tournaments popular and to kind of get the community involved, we need to stream them. So that's what we're looking into right now, is how to capture the footage from within the arcade machine on a modern day PC. So that's what we're trying to figure out. That's what we're trying to research right now. I know it can be done because I think there's arcades in Japan who stream like old video games, old fighters. Yeah, definitely tournaments are really important. Streaming is really important. So yeah, that's definitely something we're trying to get going, is the tournament part of the arcade.
I think that would be really cool because, back in the day, you didn't really know how good somebody else was. Like, you might be the best at Street Fighter on the Super Nintendo with your group of friends, but when you entered an arcade, it felt almost like you're entering the championship league. You're playing against that other kid from another block or whatever, and he might know some moves you don't know with Ryu or Ken or whoever you might be using, right?
Definitely. I mean, I even in the couple weeks that the arcade has been open, I've met a lot of people who thought they were like the best in Street Fighter. During their day in their neighborhood, they were the best. And then they come over here and, they'll play someone like me or my friend. And then, they kind of realize, okay, well, they're not the best, overall.
Maybe they're not as amazing as they thought they were.
Yeah. And it's happened to me. I mean, I remember like, being the best in my kind of local community, and then going to an arcade and just getting absolutely demolished. And that was like a wake up call. You realize, okay, well, you're pretty far from the best. There's a lot of work to be done. A lot of practice has to be done. But that's how you kind of test yourself. Like in anything is, you go up against the best and you see how you do. And that, that kind of gives you an idea of where you need to improve and get better. And so yeah.
Yeah, those are some definitely wise words right there. That's some words of wisdom that, like, how do you test yourself? Play against the best or compete against the best. Gauge where you're at and get better at what you do.
Definitely.
And I'm super excited to see what types of things and what types of arcades you guys are going to pull. Because, like I said, I saw things like Dragon Quest, and I saw, what else did I see? I did see the Simpsons arcade, and I was hearing all the sound effects from the Mortal Kombat and the Street Fighter. And I really hope that tournaments and arcades can come back, even if it's just for a little bit. You guys could be the center, of bringing that type of nostalgia back, because there was many people who loved arcades, and I was one of them. I think one of them back in the day with like laundromats and stuff. I used to play Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man all the time. That was my thing. But again, it's one of those things where I thought I was good, but chances are there's people way better than me.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays. But I think the question is definitely there, and it'll stay there for a while. Is there a market? I think so. I really do. Because I see people in there who are willing to pay the money and have like a a collection of a in-box complete Mega Man X or things from the Virtual Boy. I've even seen some things in there from the Atari 2600, and like you said, you even have things from the Magna Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, collecting is huge right now. I think a lot of people collect a lot of stuff. Video games is definitely high on the list for a lot of people. Nostalgia is really popular right now. Like retro, everything is popular. Retro shoes, retro clothes, retro games. Vinyl is humongous now. So I think just in general, like this generation really loves to collect things, to display things. Of course, social media kind of like kickstarts it and helps it because, people post their collections and they get a lot of positive feedback. People recognize those collections and it kind of makes you want to get more and buy more and have more and, put more on the shelf and stuff. So yeah, there's definitely a market for all things that are collectible right now.
Yeah, and I would agree. But thank you so much, Joey, for being on here. It has been a blast. Our 20 minutes just flown by, and I hope maybe I can have you again in the future. How does that sound?
For sure, man. I appreciate you inviting me, dude. This has been very cool. So thank you very much, man.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Zero's Game Room. Want to give a special thanks to my graphics designer @Trekit on Twitter and @David_Ritter for voicing my intro. Keep up to date with the podcast by liking it on Facebook @Zero's Gaming Room and on Twitter @Zero's Game Room. Until next time, GG with a definite re.